Hi and welcome everybody to our second DIGGS Q&A session. My name is Roger Chandler from Kinetics and today Scott and I are actually in the same room at the IFC conference down here in Orlando. Scott, it's nice to be face to face with you for one of these webinars.
It is. It's good to have you on this side of the pond for a change.
It's nice to be here and the weather's great too. I love this changing weather. Got to mention the weather.
It's way better than that 18 inches of snow that you left.
So today, Scott and I are going to cover what are the benefits of geotechnical data interchange for consultants. So in the first DIGGS Q&A session, we looked at the benefits for the Department of Transports and the clients. And we're going to dig straight in and look at the two major benefits. And these are effectively internal benefits, so streamlining your internal processes and how you're using your software, and also streamlining the data delivery externally across multiple clients. And we'll learn a bit more about that as we go through. Scott, why don't I hand over to you to give us a bit of background as to what your customers and clients that you see are currently doing and what their benefits are.
Sounds good. So when we talk to organizations, whether it's owners or it's consultants, we generally find that this is what they tell us their geotechnical data archive is. Boxes and boxes of paper-based files, and in some cases they may even have a more modern version of PDF borehole logs, and none of that is actually data. Because if you want to use that again, you have to re-input it into whatever software you're using today to analyze, visualize, generate those borehole logs again, combine it with new data, that sort of thing. Unfortunately, without having data, there's a lot of inefficiencies that get brought into your current process. So what data interchange standards allows you to do is that data producers, whether it's within your organization or even external to your organization, it might be scenarios where you're working for a DOT, and they want to provide you historical data for when the road was originally built. So a producer could be internal or it could be external, but then it allows data consumers to actually utilize the data using software that best fits their needs, and that software may be different than who produced it. So both sides of the equation are allowed to use software that suits their needs. It is software vendor independent, which is a very important thing because there's no perfect software out there. As much as Roger and I would love to sell everybody our software, we recognize that people within different organizations or different departments within an organization have different needs. Yet they still may need to consume that geotechnical data. So data interchange allows that to happen. So some examples of data producers, if you're working internally, are your field personnel who are logging boreholes, maybe your lab personnel who are performing the lab testing, design personnel who are reviewing and QAing and combining all of these pieces of data into a single system to analyze and visualize. And it's very likely that you're not going to have software that fits all of those people's needs. So you've got to communicate data between the software. We were recently engaged by Ohio DOT to assess their internal processes as well as their consultant processes. And what we found, and this is a fairly typical process we see pretty much any time we talk to potential clients, is that there's a lot of repetitive data entry. And so if we go through the entire workflow of a site investigation, you might start off and lay out your boreholes in CAD, and you're inputting the project and borehole information in there along with putting them on the drawing so it has an XY location. You might actually export that to a KML file, which is good because you can check for obstacles in Google Earth, send it to your field personnel so they can locate it. But then when your staff engineer actually goes out to the field, he stakes those boreholes in the ground, he is going to rewrite the borehole ID, project ID, any other location details you want on the stake so that it can be identified at a later time. Then you're logging the borehole, you're handwriting the field log and handwriting each sample label, and so you're re-inputting project number, borehole number, sample number, depth repeatedly. You get back into the office, and if you're using something like Ghent, you're manually typing that data into Ghent. While that's going on, You might be working on a test schedule where you're having to manually write or type that same project borehole sample depth data that you've already now recorded 3 or 4 times. You're going to write it up again, give that to the lab. The lab might start some testing. You might be getting survey data in from your surveyor, and you're going to have to type that in again, or it doesn't get typed in at all because it's too much trouble to actually type in 6 or 7 decimal places on a latitude longitude. The lab testing is ongoing. They're handwriting the project borehole sample depth, sample ID on each lab sheet for each test. So if you've got 3 lab tests, you've just added 3 more actually of that redundant data entry. If you want to calculate the results, you're going to transcribe those results into Excel. You're going to summarize them on a summary table in Excel, and if you want some of that back on your borehole log, you're going to type it in again. So 11 steps is fairly typical. The best we've seen is about 9. Worst we've seen is about 15. So anywhere in that range is pretty common. But if you're doing data interchange, that entire process can be eliminated other than the handwriting of the sample labels and the staff engineers staking the holes and writing labels on that. So some consumers are consultants if you're getting those data for historical projects from your client, or when you're teaming on projects with other consultants who might be generating data. Clients, such as DOTs, Army Corps, your large commercial industrial clients, those are all consumers. And once again, they're not going to have software that fits their needs. That might be what you prefer to use. So you've got to communicate data to them. So Roger, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you have seen in the UK where people are streamlining their processes using data interchange?
Sure. Thank you, Scott. The interesting thing is that once you have got over rekeying all your information, you've got to get it to move between the software packages that you are using. And that can be a real problem. So here are just a selection of the products that we see customers who are using at various stages throughout their data journey, from logging on site to testing in the laboratory, pretty much every aspect that you had covered there in your flow diagram earlier, Scott. And the big problem is all these software packages need to somehow be compatible with all the other software packages. And from a software producer's point of view, that's a never-ending nightmare. As soon as you become compatible with one of their output formats, something else comes along, they change something, they do something, and you just end up chasing your tail all the time. The beauty with doing a standard data interchange format like DIGGS is it can sit in the middle of all those products, and as long as those products can read and write DIGGS, which is a standardized format, then effectively I can export anything from my borehole logging software, putting it into my analysis software, or do the same with CAD, GIS, and anything else. So this is a really good illustration. This is one of the first things that caught my eye in geotechnical data management when I started this about 20 years ago. As my career path, this diagram that just shows how data interchange works and joins all those products together. So you can look at, once you've worked out not typing your data so many times, you can now look at streamlining that internal process as well. It actually goes even further when you look at delivering data to your client. So you may already be working with lots of different clients. We've got several on the screen here. And maybe they all have different data delivery standards. They may be asking you to do a different database format, an Excel spreadsheet, a GINT file, whatever it is that they're asking you to do. And every job you're having to do differently. So every job there, you are having to come up with different export formats, different ways of working, and making life difficult. The idea of DIGGS, of it being standardized geotechnical data, is that you can produce the same data file format for each of your clients. So it makes your job so much easier in the geotechnical consulting firm position in this diagram here. So in summary, I think it's fair to say, Scott, that what we're doing here is enabling the consultants to get data from their clients. So this is the DOTs actually giving them data to start with and reusing it without re-inputting it. That's really big. Make sure you are not re-inputting your data. As Scott pointed out on that flowchart, it's surprising just how quickly it adds up. And 11 times, if you're doing something 11 times, you really need to be asking yourself why you're doing that. We're going to eliminate the redundant data entry via this process, and then we're going to optimize everything for exporting to clients as well as internal. And this ultimately will lower your risk, save you time, and therefore save you money, while also enabling you to deliver a better product to your clients. So Scott, hopefully that's covered everything we wanted to talk about here on the webinar. Thank you very much for your time. We better get off to the conference, where we've actually got a DIGGS workshop here this week. So if you want to come and meet us in person, come down to the IFC DIGGS workshop and meet Scott and myself. But for now, Scott, thank you very much for your time. It's good to team up in the same room for one of these webinars, and we will see you for webinar number 3. Thanks very much, Scott.